This is Congressman Hice.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and likewise, I want to say congratulations to you on your first hearing, and we certainly wish you the best as you lead this committee. So congratulations. Ms. Gressler, I'd like to come to you. We hear a lot about the support of the national paid family leave and medical. And I get that. I mean, it sounds wonderful, but we all know at the end of the day there's nothing free, and at some point this has an enormous cost associated with it. And you brought that up in your opening statement. I'd like to hit on some of that, if we can, whether we're talking higher taxes or increased debt, lower benefits, fewer promotions for women. There's a lot of costs associated with this. And once those factors are put into play, I mean, sometimes we hear as much as 74% of Americans favor this type of legislation, but when the costs associated with it are added, the popularity of this drastically begins to drop off. Could you elaborate on some of the details of some of these trade-offs?
Yeah, there is broad support for a paid family leave program if you just ask that question. But then if you get into what are the trade-offs, you know, if you were asked, are you willing to pay $450 a week, fewer than half of Americans are willing to do that. And then when you get into trading off spending on current programs, which with the tight deficits that we have right now, you would have to, less support. So when workers are asked, would you be willing to trade lower Social Security spending or education and other, only 21% of people are willing to support a federal paid family leave program. And I think it's important to note, what will the cost be? Because we don't really know. The state programs have been so underutilized. In New Jersey, only 1% of people who are eligible for the caregiving benefit use it. Only 12% of parents who are eligible for the benefit use it. So it appears that costs can be relatively small. In reality, if you have a federal program and you have companies that start canceling their current policies and shifting those costs onto the federal workers, then the cost of that program will expand over time, and it's not going to be a cup of coffee a week. And I don't see low-income workers buying cups of coffee a week because they don't have that to give it up. More like it's going to be a take of gas instead of that. You know, the American Action Forum has estimated upwards of $1,500 for the average worker to have a paid family leave program. And as I noted, those low-income workers are not going to be able to use that program. It's better off to let them have that money and use it as they see best fit for their families.
I would think also that it would impact the tax rate in states that implement this, at least in some states. Are you aware of that?
If you had a federal program,
yes,
they would have to choose whether or not they keep their existing program, which would be a nightmare for businesses to have to figure out which one they're going through. But yes, when you have a federal program, the tax rate would start out probably relatively low and then grow over time. I've talked to some of the insurers in New York, and they actually go through a private insurance market, and they've said, we're in the business now, but we can't stay in the business unless they increase the tax rates. It won't be affordable for us, so they won't be able to provide that policy.
Okay, thank you. You also mentioned in your opening statement about the impact of the Tax Cuts and Job Act and how that, obviously the boom in the economy, record low unemployment, and all this that is out there. I know I have several businesses, many businesses in my district and hundreds of them across the state of Georgia that are voluntarily offering multiple benefits, from higher wages to benefits and leave and all sorts of things because they are more profitable. So can you talk from a national perspective how the tax cut has affected private industry and how that really, if it's your opinion, is more effective than a national stamp?
Of course, so it provided huge resources that the employers could now use to meet their employees' demands. And a lot of those employers surveyed them and said, what would you like? And they wanted more benefits, particularly paid family leave. And that's why we've seen this huge growth in those policies. And everyone has pointed out today, it's in employers' best interest to provide these policies. You have higher retention. It's very costly to replace a worker. They're going to stay there longer. They're going to be happier. And so employers know better than policymakers and bureaucrats what's in their best interest, and the best way for them to be able to offer those policies is to have the resources to do so in a flexible way. A one-size-fits-all policy does not work for 28 million different businesses across the U.S. or 159 million different workers. You need a policy, just as Mrs. Delora communicated. She had a policy that wasn't standard. It wasn't a formal policy, but it worked. It was something that her employer, different ones at the time, were allowed to provide her with. And I would love to see more of that, is not having the employer have to say, go to the federal government, you're going to deal with the bureaucrats, and they're going to tell you what you can get, but rather, let me work with you. I want to keep you on as an employee, and I want to make this work, and let's see what's flexible and what works best for you.
Thank you for your testimony. I yield back, Madam